Alright guys, here we go, another video lesson time. It is time to talk about the philosophy of the revolution. What does that mean? Well, it means the thinking process, and basically we're going to talk about the hearts and the minds of the common, normal people of the time, and the colonists, do a little bit of review, get into all this stuff. Most of this we should know. First two key points are very familiar, but we're going to go over them again and make sure we have them through the point of view, through the prism, through the lens, if you will, of the common colonist. And once we've done that, we're going to talk about the Second Continental Congress, and we're going to get into the actual declaring of independence. And starting tomorrow, we will start talking about the war. So, objective today, let's begin. Explain how and why colonial attitudes about government and the individual changed in the years leading up to the American Revolution. So, like we mentioned, this is the hearts and minds of the people. We're talking about why people changed their minds, why people started to think, hey, this whole revolution thing might be a good idea. On your mind, big brain question of the day, why was it so important for the people to have a change in heart, for the revolution to be a success? Keep that in mind. It's going to matter. It's important. Think about it. Why is it so important that the people cared? When has that ever mattered? Key terms are up there, and for the do now, just remember the First Continental Congress, what happened there, right? When we talked about it, we talked about how not a lot happened. It was kind of a meeting. We sent some complaints over, and the complaints were responded with a no. But fighting had begun, and just keep that in mind as well. Let's move on. Like we said, philosophy of the revolution. This is a recorded session. Objective we already covered. Let's get into key point one. So, key point one. Sorry about that. Enlightenment ideas inspired many American thinkers to emphasize individual rights over hereditary privilege. When we say hereditary privilege, we're talking about like caste systems, social ladders, things like that, nobles. While religion, the First Great Awakening, can't stress enough, First Great Awakening, strengthened Americans' view of themselves as people blessed with liberty. So the First Great Awakening gives people this idea that, hey, we have liberty, right? Liberty doesn't come from the government. It comes from God. It's given to us. We're born with it. So on and so forth. So keep that in mind. If you need time on the slide, go ahead and pause here, because we're going to move on and talk about the Enlightenment really briefly. So, we've already talked about the Enlightenment. You talked about it last year, but we're talking about it one more time. I can't stress enough, and this is something to keep in mind. In this era, all these Enlightenment ideas are brand new, right? Like, y'all know that people should have rights. Y'all know that liberty is something that you should already be given, but this is new to these people. And John Locke specifically, right, impacts the hearts, the feelings, and the minds, the thoughts of the people. They say, like, this guy's making a whole lot of sense, and he makes me feel good, right? American colonists were loving this idea of individual rights. Just the concept alone, they were like, this is really great. We get to do what we want because we have our own rights as individual people. It's not based on the government and all that good stuff. So colonists love Locke. They love his ideas. Again, if you need time, pause here. If not, we're going to move forward and talk about the First Great Awakening. Again, the First Great Awakening is a religious movement. It opens up people's minds to the idea of the individual. All right. On top of questioning leadership, people will develop idea that they are born/blessed with freedom and liberty. God-given rights, not so much rights that the government can take away. Government can't take away rights because they were given to you from God. That's what the First Great Awakening does. So if you need time, go ahead and pause here. Again, I would recommend getting that last bit more than anything else, because you should know it's a religious movement. It's a religious movement that makes people realize that God gave them their rights, not the government. Super important. Let's move on. So, key point 2 is up. And for key point 2, we're talking about American ideas of Republican forms of government come from the impact of documents like Thomas Paine's Common Sense and the Declaration of Independence. These beliefs shaped American understanding of the ideals the nation is based on. So, when it says Republican, it doesn't mean like political party Republican. It doesn't mean like Trump or anything like that. Or Republican today. Or even like the Republicans of Lincoln. It's referring to the system of government known as Republican. The idea of selecting somebody to represent you, and that person goes and speaks for you, and you have your rights as an individual, and that person's supposed to protect them. Right? That's the idea of Republican. That's what a republic is, right? Like in the United States, we're not a democracy. We're a republic. A democracy would be more like Greece. So just to keep that in mind, we're a republic. Republic is like Rome, Roman Republic. That's the origins. Um, and these documents, Thomas Paine's Common Sense and the Declaration, really helped. And we're going to look at them in a little bit after we get through these key points, because we're going to have a little time at the end. So just keep that in mind. But let's declare independence already. So Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Jefferson wrote it, right? We credit Jefferson. And the Declaration is a lot like a breakup letter to the King of England that says America wants to be its own country. All right, that's basically what it's doing. And it also includes a list of grievances. So it's America saying, hey, we want to separate, be our own thing. It's not angry. There's no violence in it. There's no threats. It's very even-keeled. It's very like, hey, it's not you, it's us. We're just too independent now. We want to be our own thing. Please? Okay, thank you. Pretty much how it goes. We'll look at that in a bit. If you need time on that, go ahead and pause it. We're going to move on to common sense. We've talked plenty of common sense. Just know Thomas Paine's Common Sense wins the hearts and minds of the common colonist. I can't stress that enough. The common, everyday person reads Common Sense, and they're like, whoa, you're right. This is common sense, Mr. Paine. And they start to picture and piece that together. So just keep that in mind. And now we're going to move forward. And if you need that, go ahead and write it. And we're going to talk about key thinkers of the Revolution. So these are 4 really important patriots that you need to get their accomplishments down. Now, if you want to do a chart, you can do a chart. Just want to write them in, you can write them in. And you can paraphrase some of this. But you need to know, right, Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense. He challenged ideas, right? Thomas Paine's is probably the shortest one. Abigail Adams, wife to John Adams, his unofficial advisor, mentioned the letters. Know that in letters to her husband where she's advising him and helping him out, they talk a lot about these issues of equality for women and different rights, and she counsels him on a lot of things. Patrick Henry, an orator, he's a very famous patriot. He said the words, give me liberty or give me death. Mercy Otis Warren, a political writer and propagandist, she was really influential into promoting the patriot message and getting their information across. She was a playwright. She very prominent and very helpful in convincing a lot of people. Right? She's a propagandist, like we said. So this will be up. If you need it, go ahead and pause. Otherwise, we're going to move forward. To our last key point of the day, the Second Continental Congress contained delegates from all 13 colonies. All right, and they discussed what the colonies would do in face of the British challenges / fighting that had already begun. So now the British are there, and there's fighting, and the colonies are like, what are we going to do about this? So there's 2 things that come out of this. 2 things that come out of the Second Continental Congress. First thing, declaration. Second Continental Congress will declare independence from Britain. All right, they appointed a committee including John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, Robert Livingston, and Roger Sherman to create it. However, we typically give Jefferson full credit because he's kind of the one that wrote most of it, and those other guys are just kind of supporting, backing him up. Now, the thing about the Declaration, we said it's like a breakup letter, right? It's just kind of like a, hey, can we separate, please, And what I cannot stress enough is declaring independence doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't. You can declare all sorts of things, but that doesn't make it true. Basically, if we were in my classroom, right, I could say right now, I declare that this classroom is the independent nation state of Cavazos land. And that doesn't mean that it's anything, and it is an independent state. Nothing's going to happen, right? Especially if they're not going to get permission, and the king is not about to give permission to the colonies to separate. So, keep that in mind as we go on to the second big contribution of the second big impact of the Second Continental Congress, and that's the creation of the Continental Army. So, the Second Continental Congress establishes the Continental Army. And they appointed George Washington as their commander. And this is the regulars. This is the full, normal army that will fight the British. Now the colonies have an army. It's not just militias. It's not Minutemen anymore. They will still be there. They'll play a major role. We'll talk about them. But now there is an army. There's an official army. They got a uniform. There's a little red on the uniform, a little bit on the cuffs and stuff, but it's mostly supposed to be blue. Again, you want to be able to tell your guys apart from the others. Blue and white, little red, like we said. I know earlier I had told you guys that I don't think there was any red, but a lot of portrayals will show it, so it's hard to deny it. But typically you see with like this guy, a lot of white, a lot of blue, very little red, more like accents than anything else. Again, gotta tell you guys apart on the battlefield. But as far as notes goes, guys, that is it. For the rest of today, there is an exit ticket. The exit ticket's on Google Classroom. In fact, I'll go to it right now. Pause here if you need it. Here's the exit ticket. It's a short exit ticket because there's an assignment, and it's not quite. Well, it's kind of like it's a quick write essentially, and it's not in the slides, but it's one we're doing. It was only going to be 3 minutes, and there's a little bit of reading, and you can access that through Teams. I don't know why I paused so dramatically, but you access it through Teams. The post will be there. The 2 sources will be there. You read the sources, and then you kind of break them down for 3 minutes. Tell me about what the sources mean or what your opinions on those. So the instructions are all on Teams. It's all there. Go ahead and look through that. If you have any questions, just message me. Let me know, and I'll help you out. But otherwise, guys, that is it for me. That is it for the video lesson. Let me know if you have any more questions or need anything else. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you all in class.